And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another episode in my Aussie supporter series. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a good friend coming to me all the way from Adelaide, South Australia, Mr. David Werner. David, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's Sunday afternoon here. It's Halloween day here, so we've been out decorating and shopping this morning to get ready for the few trick or treaters we get around here. It's not as big as it is in the States, but yeah, just enjoying a nice sunny spring day with a beer in hand and ready to chat some footy.
Oh, I cannot wait. That is great. And I've heard that discussing with a few of them that Halloween is not a big thing over in Australia. We're here. It is insane. Every store has costumes for little kids all the way up to adults. But that's
Mm.
not why we're here. We're here to talk some footy, but as I like to do in all of my episodes, especially talking to fans different, I'm kind of finding out a little bit of who I'm talking to outside of the realm of
Mhm.
footy. So why don't you give us just a real quick bio of who you are, David?
Outside of footy, that's a strange thing to think because I live so much in. I am a sports nut, so it's not just footy. It's soccer and a lot of American sports. I lived in Oregon for 5 years, so I've got a fairly heavy American kind of sports realm as well. But outside of that, I studied history in college over there, and just love. So that's probably my other thing is I love film and history and then just, but geez, so much of my life is dominated by sports. That's the thing. It's an interesting question that way because you wake up, read news, sports news, apps, all that stuff. But yeah, no, I'm married over here in Australia, and the wife and I both big sports fans. So it's a life very much dominated by that. But yeah, I'm just trying to think to make myself sound interesting outside of sports, and I'm just like, it's just so much of my life is is in that realm. It's a little nuts when you think about it, but yeah.
You and I are kindred spirits, sir. If you ask me the same question, like how do I describe myself outside of sports? I go, well, that eliminates about 95% of what I like to talk about. So
Yeah, it's like
I'm very much with you on that. So let's get into it. We're here to talk footy. So I gotta ask, what is your favorite thing about Australian rules football?
that's a great question. It always reminds me of this ad back in the late '90s. I'd love to find it. I think there's an account on Twitter somewhere that tweeted this video. It's a TV ad that was like explaining Australian football, and it had like there was an NBA player in it, and it was just they were talking about you bounce this ball, you run with the ball. You might have seen it maybe, but it's the fact that this sport, this crazy sport that we love, has just so much different stuff from a bunch of different sports if you look at it in different ways, but it amalgamates into this amazing sport that is so unique in of itself as well. You've got little elements of different things, but it's so fast moving, it's so highly skilled, and it's so physical as well. But as well as being so highly skilled, fast moving, unique as far as just the amount of different athletic talent it requires, and in different places, there's a place for so many different kinds of athletes on the field. You've got your small forwards, you've got your big lumbering Charlie Dixon style forwards, and then you got your big backmen, your small backmen, your elite, inside midfielders that we'll get into. I know we'll get into a different stuff of my fandom, but like guys like Gavin Wangane back in the day, who was just this rubbery athletic player, kind of had that Giannis extreme flexibility just to go bounce to another sport, and that's what I love about it. Is there's so many different elements of the sport that make it this unique thing. But then it's just beyond all that, it's just so bloody exciting to watch. You can argue about high scoring in the last 10, 15 years compared to when I grew up. I'm born in 1988, so I grew up in the 90s when Ablets and Lockets were kicking 100 goals a season, which doesn't happen now. But there is still a fair bit of scoring and excitement in that sense. But then the battles inside the field as well. Elite good midfield battles and all that kind of. There's just so much going on the footy field that there's something. It's just it's an amazing sport in that way. It's just so unique, which I'm sure as you've come to know it, you found that as well. As just nothing else like it. But it just combines so many different things that you can take from different sports as well.
Completely agree. And I think I know the exact commercial that you're talking about. And It has like Hakeem Olajuwon saying something
That
that's
might be who I'm
connected
thinking.
like
Yeah.
basketball. There's one that's like there's an English soccer player that's like kicked 60 million goals, and
Yeah.
it's like they go through that. And then there's one is like a Welsh lion. These guys tackle each other every 10 seconds, and then shows tackles. And then
Mhm.
like I think Carl Lewis is in it. He's like, guys can run
Yes.
4 40. Yeah, it's I love that commercial because it really is, because it shows professionals in different, like even one of them was like a like BB King saying somebody playing the blues for longer than 50 years. I'd like to see that. And then it shows Carlton and
That's the exact
Collingwood.
ad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd like to see that, I think is the name of it's, and there's a
Yeah.
couple of them. There's even one that has like a female. It's like bunch of guys in short shorts running around. I'd like to see that. So it's, I know that exact commercial. That is a
Yeah.
really, really good commercial. I really wish I would have copied it down too, because it is a great introduction. So we'll stay
Yeah.
on that. Um, can you remember your earliest footballing memory?
It would be back around 94. I remember watching, so Port Adelaide being a team that's come from the SANFL, the South Australian National Football League here, and entered the national competition. The only club to do that, by the way, outside of Victoria, obviously. And so I remember watching. That's how I got into being Port Adelaide fan, was watching the Port Adelaide Magpies back in the day. And my earliest memory is Scott Hodges, a big, massive, just an elite forward who sadly his AFL career didn't go quite as well. He got picked up by the Crows, unfortunately, when they came in. He didn't like that at all because he got berated by Crows fans for being a Port boy still, and he was a proud Port boy, so he didn't like that. But in the SANFL, he was a McGarry medalist, 100 goals a year for a lot of years, and I just remember him and Port coming back against Woodville West Torrens that year after being some massive deficit down like later in the game in the second half, and they came stormed home in the last quarter and ran over the top of the Eagles with 8 or 9 goals in the last quarter. And just that's my earliest memory. I still haven't found a copy of the game to watch it since. And so I know it from YouTube highlights and random, wiki bits, but that's all. I really want to get a good copy of it to watch it again. But that's really my first clear memory. But then it's just watching grainy games on the local TV stations, watching the Magpies, and then watching. I watched the Crows were a big team then before Port came into the national competition, and all the rest of my family is Crows fans. I'm the black sheep of the family, as they tell me. So that's my earliest memories, is that, and then going and playing myself as in the minis competition up in the mid north South Australia, up at shout out to Riverton, a town of 800 people. So if anyone's listening that knows that town, it's a small world, so maybe. But playing footy as a mini around 7 or 8 years old, and then watching those Port boys before we came into the national comp. That's kind of a combined memory, I guess, because those kind of things happened at a very similar time for me, starting my playing time and watching and learning to love Port Adelaide at those times, which was a very easy time to love Port, because they were winning grand final after grand final in the SANFL as they made their push to say this is why we need to be in the AFL.
That's outstanding, and you already answered my next question, but I'm very interested for somebody that Port Adelaide again comes from the sample, hops into the AFL, and has to change
Mm-hmm.
names. I mean, for me, I always thought that was a fascinating thing. But I mean, was it the reason that you support Port Adelaide was because of the Magpies, or is it just because this gave you a team in the AFL, now formerly VFL competition?
Uh, yeah, it's the Magpies first, I guess, and then I've got, I think there's my family still has photos which they probably hold as ransom of me in Crows gear when I was before they came into the competition. So yeah, I wasn't a Crows. I was just there with a team in Adelaide. So, but then yeah, as soon as I knew Port were coming in, I was just like, that's my team. And so it is very much because of the Magpies. I never was a Crows fan. My family put me in the gear and said that was your team. So it's yeah, I still give them shit about saying that's borderline child abuse. um, that was just it was never a question for me. As soon as, and I was like only probably when the announcement that Port were coming in would have been, was it late 95 or 96? So I was only 7 or 8 years old, and it was as clear as day, clear as mud. It was like an adult thought in my childlike mind that this is my team. It was a very sound decision for me. I was like, no, not even a question. So it was very much the Magpies were the reason for that. And then also did give me that team that I was actually, as much as a 7 or 8-year-old can be passionate about footy at that age. It was a very passionate. That team was my passion. So for them, with their history, and even at that age, I knew, and it's fascinating to see people that try to split the team's histories and say the Port Adelaide Power Football Club in the AFL is a different team, because I knew at that age that the reason that we were getting a team was because of the history that we have and the success we've had. All these players that pushed for this team were the likes of Tim Ginniver and John Cahill was our first coach in the AFL. It was all Port Adelaide Magpie history making this club and getting this club into the AFL. So at that age, I knew it, and that was why I just, maybe being a history nerd all my life. I just always was reading that kind. I was a newspaper reader at 7 or 8 years old. It was weird. All my friends thought I was weird, but it's just so I kind of understood all that stuff, and it was a very easy decision to be a Port Adelaide AFL fan, as well as continue with the Magpies as well.
That's awesome. In the fact that you break the mold, because I've heard so many stories from so many other people that their mother, their father, their brother, their sister, everybody was this team. So they kind of went with it. So to see you being kind of the black sheep is kind of nice. But so I got to ask, does it get super tense during the showdowns between you and the family, or can there be at least a little bit of courtesy in the household when the showdowns are on?
Bit of column A, bit of column B. It has been quite contentious at times, and then we're all, we're family, we love each other. So but my brother, I'm the oldest of four, and my younger brother, he's probably the biggest. My two youngest brother, but my second youngest brother is probably the biggest Crows fan. He's a member of them and a massive footy fan as well. He still plays and coaches currently. Himself, I haven't played for years because of one of those bodies that doesn't. It's just I break ankles as easy as I break a glass. But yeah, he's a massive Crows fan as much as I am Port, and so we have gone to showdown together. I've poured a beer over his head actually that wasn't a showdown. He's that much of a dickhead, my brother. That he came to his fandom of giving me shit as a Crows fan is he came to a Port game with me once at Adelaide, just because he loves footy, and I was going to the game. It was a Friday night game. He's like, well, come and have some beers and watch the footy with you. He bought a Geelong Guernsey on the way to the game to wear just to give me shit, and then ran around pretending he was the biggest Geelong fan when Geelong unfortunately won that night, and so I poured a beer over his head. So yeah, it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B.
Man,
the courtesy of it is after that, the next day I'd also tackled him to the ground outside Adelaide Oval later that night, after he kept on running around being a dickhead, and I washed the grass stains out of his new Geelong Guernsey the next day for him as an apology, even though it was his fault. So that was the courtesy. But yeah, with showdowns, if it's a close one, the Josh Jenkins, the game where Josh Jenkins hit the post, but apparently it didn't hit the post. It hit the post. But I was at that
Mama
game with
told
my
me
brother
not to lie.
That one. So I was there with my brother, and we had a great night. We both just went, oh fuck, that was a good game. And sorry, do you beep out, or is it fine that I?
We'll put it as explicit. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Sorry. It can pop out when I'm chatting footy.
It is not a problem. In fact, I told him when I started this, I said, if it gets explicit, I'll let you know. So let's keep it as raw and natural as possible.
Yeah.
I've said it in numerous episodes before. One of my favorite things about listening to Australians and broadcasts is that you are a little bit more lenient on colorful language, shall we say.
Yeah.
So I said it in my grand final preview of 2020. I said, honestly, I wish it was more here, because it's a raw, natural emotion than this whitewashed, oh darn smack it, the try not to cuss type of calling that you get over here. So feel free, do not hold back. If you do, it's not a problem at all. So
right.
it is perfectly fine.
Especially when talking showdowns, it's always going to come out. But yeah, no, we were at that showdown, and we had a great night, and went out for beers after, and then didn't fight each other that night. So we have and we're both enjoy the banter of footy, so we try to one up each other all the time. So sometimes we can just, it's just yeah. And but my parents just shake their heads and wonder how I turned out this way, being a Port fan, and they just and how passionate I am for it. They just like, what happened? What did we do wrong? And I'm like, no, it's just you did everything you did wrong was with my brother. So again, there's the banter side of it. But yeah,
Love it.
yeah, no, it's just it's all love, but we do occasionally call each other a dickhead and walk away. But that's about it. Yeah.
As long as you love each other in the long run, that's all that matters.
He was one of my grooms. He was one of my groomsmen in my wedding, and so we're very close. So that's why we can call each other dickhead over footy. So
that's absolutely outstanding. So we'll stay on it. Can you remember the first power item that you were given or bought?
I'm 99% sure it's a woolen, and I don't know where it is, and I wish I did. It's one of those ones that probably got lost when my mum was, cleaning out clothes, because 8 years old, you don't sort out your own shit. At least I didn't. So I had a woolen long sleeve Port jumper. So it was like we would have got, it was the first season, so a real scratchy kind of old woolen kind of long sleeve thing. But I actually got it signed by John Cale, because he came up and did like an appearance at the footy club that I was playing at so it's got his signature very, very badly on it, because it's woolen, so it's hard to sign. But yeah, so that's the first thing I know I had. That, as well as an old Port scarf from when it was about the same time, I think I got these two items. It's a Port scarf that was made so brand new from when they got announced that it's blue rather than teal. So it's just, I think a company just was like, oh, these are the colors. And so that's somewhere in the closet, but it's very frail now. So, but yeah, those were the two things, just two really scratchy woolen old school footy items. So you wouldn't want to wear them, but they're very classic as well. And I asked mum here and there, I said, have you come across that Guernsey at all? And she says no. So I'm hoping at some point when they tear through all their old boxes that they'll find it somewhere. But I'm not hopeful, unfortunately, because they were Crows fans. So
just hope it doesn't end up in the bin. The only bad part about the Crows part. So I've said it numerous times over the podcast that I consider myself a diehard. I get up early to watch the games. I'm always trying to catch up on information, different things like that. But to each and every person, their fandom is different. Their support of their club is different. So I just want to really quickly, can you describe your passion or your fandom, as I call it, for the Port Adelaide Football Club?
Yeah, it's whatever the top tier is. So if that's diehard, then that's where I'm at. I've lived and breathed it since I was, and I follow a lot of sports, and I follow them with a pretty equal passion. But Port's definitely right at the top there, with a couple of others. Oregon, being an Oregon alum, it's Oregon football as well. But Port being the first one is the one that hurts. Like I'm harder on them than I am any other team, because the other teams I've come into as an older, like as a teenager and adult, but Port has been with me since. You always talk about when you're a baby, your first memories. Port is part of my first memories, so I'm harder on them as a fan probably than I am almost any other team I follow. So it is probably a step above in that sense. And as being a diehard, that's the dyed in the wool thing is they're the one team I have that is a hometown team. The rest of them are teams that I've picked up through travel. So I am quite hard on them as a fan and am a diehard in that sense. I follow all the. If there's a player that we're rumored with, I'll go on, start, and I don't know, most of the players around the league I know of from having seen them a bit, but if we're linked with, like, for example, when Finlayson came in over the off season, I knew of him and I watched him play, but I didn't actually know him that well beyond just the times he plays against Port. And so you go watch there's all those shitty YouTube compilation clips that you go and watch when a player's linked with your team, whatever sport it may be, and go and read their wiki and find out kind of what kind of person they are. Like, does he stay out too late at nightclubs, or what kind of reliability? Not that there's anything wrong. I do that myself all the time, but it's that's how in depth I get. I want to know who this person is coming into my club. Is he going to fit right into the because Port, beyond losing preliminary finals at home at a regular pace, unfortunately at the moment, they've got a good culture, it seems. So you're always trying to find out. So that's how in depth I am with that. And then just a bad result, I cry. And it's not like, just weeping. It's just, you get frustrated. It's like the frustration brings out tears. that kind of stuff. Certainly 2007, I often talk about having PTSD from that still. And I genuinely, it was like that hurt me, and it hurts me to this day, like to lose a grand final that badly. People try to joke about it with me. I just say, shut the fuck up, because I don't want to, that was a hard day for me. I know it's like a personal thing. Like, it's young relationships. They didn't actually mean that much, but I'd had a girl dump me the week before, and then Port lose by 119 points a week later in grand finals. Like, that was just one of the worst weeks of my life. And I was just like, so that's how diehard I am, that is actually a serious thing for me. And look, I get it. If I was a fan of Geelong, I see the guy that comes to Geelong Port Adelaide games wearing a 119 Guernsey when they play, and I go, look, I'd probably do it myself maybe, but I'm just like, that was a hard day. And that's how diehard I am. A grand final loss 14 years ago hurts me still. It deeply hurts me. And but then the wins, the Stephen Motlop goal, like with 20 seconds to go in that showdown, I was there. I was on the hill. That is still when I've watched that game. I watch that game probably once every 6 months, just because it was such a fun game to be out, and I try to relive it and try to give myself those emotions. So as much as the bad games hurt me deeply, the fun ones give me the greatest joy, in my life, besides, marrying my wife, maybe. And her being a Port, she's from LA, but she's moved over here and become a pretty heavy diehard Port fan herself. And she might say that win might be better than the day we got married too. So it's equal parts, but yeah, it affects me unhealthily in my emotional state. Is Port affects me, so I guess that's a diehard, I would say.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Sometimes those losses, no matter what sport it is, sometimes they hurt even more than you would think they should. So there's no judgment here at all. I know exactly that feeling for sure. I've dealt with that. Unfortunately, it wasn't as bad a loss, but I know 2016 still yanks up my craw a little bit, losing to the Doggies. As much as I was happy for the Doggies fans to end their drought, that one still gnaws at me, because I believe a few of the umpiring decisions were less than correct, in my personal opinion. Again, I'm not an umpire whiner. I really haven't, but that one still rubs me the wrong way, because I think a couple of those decisions, if they go the other way, I think the game changes a little bit. I can't guarantee you that, but it really does frustrate me. So let's just safe to say, on a few of the boards, there were a few Swans fans that were super happy when the D's beat the Dogs this year. So I'm not one of them. I'll be honest with the people that listen to it. I was not one of them. I was not going on and celebrating the Dogs lost. There's a tiny bit of, now you kind of know what we went through. So, but we'll get off me for a second. With Port Adelaide, you do have that rich history in the Sandful. So I'm going to let you add that too. Can you remember the first Port Adelaide Magpies or Power game that you ever attended?
It was a Power game. It was, because my family was never going to take me to a Sandful game, I don't think, when I was that young. But it was a Power game, and it was actually with my footy club. It was a bus down with my team. So it was our junior Colts team at RSMU. They took us, bussed us down to the old, it was even before it was Amy Stadium, Footy Park. Still had the steel bench seats as well, before they did their upgrade and actually got individual seats. It's amazing to think back to how, with stadiums now in Australia and indeed worldwide, to think that was a professional stadium. But that was kind of the late 90s into 2000s, was, when the sport was really, motorizing towards that real fully professional look. But yeah, it was Port versus Western Bulldogs. And we beat them for you, even though it's 17 years before that grand final. I think we won by about 37 points. But the biggest memory of that game was actually, unfortunately, an injury. It was a Denny Morton went up, flew for a mark, and he was a good little utility player for Port and a popular one. And he flew for the mark and just came down straight in his neck. And I was like, at that game, and the way he fell and was on the ground for a bit, I just sat there and thought, fuck, I've just seen someone die at my first footy game. Thankfully not, but that was what my mind thought, because being around a bunch of footy kids that were 9 years old at the time, we were all just like, we all overreact because we think we've seen the worst thing. And but he got stretched off and he was fine, and came back and played a bit later in the year, I think. But that was the one distinct memory I have of that, apart from the fact that just being a group of footy lads at that age, there was a some Port fans in our group, but obviously there was Crows fans and others. So there was a bit of banter, like, there's the guys that weren't Port fans were just coming down hoping Port would lose. But we won by, I think it was 37 points. It was around round 12. It was June. So it was a cold kind of night, which with steel bench seats wasn't good. But that was definitely the first game I went to. I didn't get to any before that because, obviously the family that were, and my family, once it got older, they started support. Like my parents took me to the 2004 two finals that we had at home. That was the good part of what my family have done for me growing up. Despite being Crows fans, they've helped support my support of Port when they've been successful at times too. So, but they weren't going to take me to a game against the Magpies with the Magpies. I think at 5-6 years old, I think it was when I started playing footy, and they started supporting it a bit more in that sense and got me on the bus for that first game, which is, like I said, I still remember I don't remember, game events beyond that injury, unfortunately, too well, being that long ago. But I just remember the feeling. It was, cool in the air. It's kind of that, winter fog came in, and those cold bench seats I just can't forget, as well as just the feeling of awe. And it's funny now that I've been to some big stadiums around the world. I've been to Liverpool and seen Barcelona play and seen some massive stadiums now in my time, but I was just like, my vision of that the Amy Stadium was fucking tiny by comparison, and it was so spread out and so low. But at that age, walking in, that was the first any sporting game I've been to. That stadium looked as big as Texas Longhorns or whatever you want to compare it to big 100,000 seaters. That's how it felt to me at the time, and that's the memory I'll hold, because it's, you always remember that first time, and it was so much fun.
Yeah, those are the ones you cherish, and that's fantastic. And just it's your age, your size, everything seems so much bigger as you get older. You notice how different things were. So that's awesome. So we'll stay in a little bit of the past still, just for a few more seconds here. And can you? And I know this question is always fun for some people, because it's like choosing your favorite child. It's never something people like to do. Can you think of your favorite power player of the past? And do you have a favorite power player currently on their list?
The past, I'd have to say, we've been blessed with a lot, thankfully, and especially in the past with me growing up. My favorite power player, Gavin Wangane. There's a few. Josh Carr was someone I've loved as well. But I think Gavin Wangane is just the one that excited me the most, and he was a part of those good memories in 2004. That prelim, and he won a grand final with us at the Magpies before he got drafted to Essendon as well. So he's one of those. It's going to not happen too much into the future, but there's that real generation of Port players that won with us in 2004. Warren Treadray, Wangane, Wakeland as well, that also have a link to having played for successful Magpies teams as well, which just for me is a special thing as a fan to see those guys of that era win with both and be a part of that history. But Wangane, just beyond his success with Port, he's a freak of an athlete. Like, the way his body could move and bend and how he saw the footy field was just unreal. He, I just want to be inside his brain. I want to, being John Malkovich, but I want to be Gavin Wangane and just see how he sees, because I was a pretty shit footy player. So I can only imagine what it was like to see the field and be able to execute what he did. But yeah, kicking that goal to put us ahead in the prelim in 2004 from the boundary, like a 50-meter snap. And then he kicked those 4 goals in a row that broke it open against Brisbane in that 2004 grand final, when it was, we were still tied up with Brisbane heading into almost time on in the third quarter of that grand final, which I think a lot of people forget when they see the 40-point win that we ended up having. But Wangane, he went off, and all sorts of goals, hanging over the back of, reading the ball better and being, behind. I can't remember who the defender was, but I should, because I've watched that game probably 50, 60 times. But, just reading the ball better and being able to take an uncontested mark when the Brisbane defenders just floated forward and kicking goals, and then snaps around the body and goals in the run. He showed everything he could do in that little 20-minute period where he helped break the game open. And so, yeah, those memories were great. And then just as a footy player, he was just, he's one of the youngest Brownlow medalists. I think he might be the youngest, possibly. No, I can't without having that in front of me. But, and that was coming off half back. And then he played, he almost won a Brownlow medal with Port again in 2003 when he played more midfield. And then and obviously, just from what I've said with those finals, he could he could kick bags of goals when he wanted to as well, and he was put in position to. So he was just an amazing player. And yeah, anyone that doesn't know much about Gavin Wangane, just get on YouTube and have a look, because he's just one of the greats to watch the highlights of. And he's first Indigenous player to reach 300 games, and he's just a real esteemed part of AFL history, I think. And I'm just so happy that he was such an integral part of Port's history as well, because he's someone to be proud of. He's gone on to, he's an artist now, and he's I met him in Melbourne Airport once briefly and took a photo with him, and he was so nice as well. I'd just gotten back from America off a 12-hour flight. I just saw him, and because I'm jet lagged and hadn't slept, because I'm 6 foot, I'm 6'1", I can't sleep in cattle class on a plane because my legs just don't work that way. So I had that kind of tired enough not caring thing to, because I'm pretty like shy about talking to a footy player or anyone, but I was so surprised to see him walking on his own through the airport. I just went, Gavin. And he turns around and smiles, and I said, I'm just a massive Port fan. I just wasn't sure it was you. And he goes, oh yeah, no, how are you? And I said, yeah, I've just got a flight from LA, I'm really tired. And he's, oh geez, yeah, that's rough. And I said, oh, did you mind taking a photo? It's really you're one of my favorite players, I'd love to. Oh yeah, no, sure, mate. And I get the phone out, and I'm struggling with the lighting, and he's like, no, come over here. So he helps me find the right, because there's skylights at the airport, and he helps me find the right spot to take a photo. And so one of those moments where I'd watched him all my life, love him, and then he sometimes you meet your heroes and it doesn't go as well, but he was an extremely nice bloke in a random airport. Airports is one of the worst places to just get talked to by a random person, I'm sure, because you're just trying to get out of there. But he was as nice as I'd hoped. So
fantastic. And then any present day players that you would say were your favorite, or is it too hard because there's so many good ones?
Yeah, we're blessed them. I forgot that was the second part of the question, because I just waffled on about Wangane for a while.
That's okay.
Look, there's a few good, like Travis Boak's an amazing player. But I think probably the one that I'm most excited by is still Robbie Gray. He's aging and doesn't quite have the regularity and consistency in those magic moments, but he still can do it. There's even this year he's a basketball fan. I'm a pretty big Lakers fan, I think, and you can see that he tries to take that kind of ball handling thing. There's one time, I think, in a game a few years ago, where he's running down the wing and he's kind of lost the ball around. So he just moves with both hands, moves the ball around his body as he's on the run, and just gathers it back up. So it's like a basketball move, I guess, like almost the equivalent of bouncing it through the legs while you're running, because he just moves the ball around his body to get to gather it again and on the run and continues. And then the amount of clutch goals he's kicked over the years that Carlton won last year, certainly in the weird pandemic year we had, where that was kind of the, sports was your escape from everything going on, and that moment. But he kicked so many great goals. 5-goal quarter against the Crows, and that showdown that Motlop had the headline at the end, but it wasn't. And Gray won the medal because he kicked 6 goals, including 5 in a quarter. It's just the amount of times he stepped up on the big stage in big games, and considering he had an ACL injury back in 2009, and I thought his career could have been over, but he just continued to be such a, and being a Victorian lad, him and Bo could have easily gone back, in those dark years after 2007, when the club was financially on its knees and it seemed like there was no hope. You would have thought those kind of guys would have been gone, but they stuck around. So Gray and Boak almost combine because they're from that, they've been around so long, and what they mean beyond just being great players and they're great to watch is they've really stuck. It's great when you see so many players go home, and that's fine. Like if a player has that homesickness reason, like everyone's different, but those guys having made their homes in South Australia and really become integral and all-time Port greats, which at Port Adelaide is no mean feat to get your name listed with the likes of your Eberts and Kales and Wanganines and those kind of names, those guys. But Gray, just the excitement level makes him probably. I don't get numbers on too many Guernseys because here I don't know why, I just buy the Guernseys and do. But I do have one of my Guernseys that does have a number as a number 9 on the back because of Gray. So yeah, he's just a special. He's kind of that Wanganine-esque thing that really makes it aesthetically pleasing for me watching footy. That he does those crazy things in the field that you don't think is humanly possible. That's what Gray has got in this current era. And like I said, it's not as consistent with his age, but he still has that. He still you can see in his advanced age that he's found a way to sees the game better than 99% of the opposition, I think, and so he's still found ways to have an impact because he can get himself into position and kick those great goals and take some clutch marks, whether it be uncontested or contested. He's just, he sees the game in a otherworldly fashion, just like Wangane. So maybe I got a thing for those guys that just do things that I can't physically do, because I wish I could do it. So I'm drawn to those players but I'm sure they're players that are well loved by many others. So.
Yeah, to each their own. Everybody's got a different preference, and for many people, it's the superstars. Sometimes, like I've told a few people, I said, for me, it's the workhorse guys that maybe don't always get the pub. Like for me, one of my favorite players is Dane Rampy for the Sydney Swans, because he's just this hardworking. He's not the superstar type of guy. He's the grunt guy in the defensive line. He's not the Jake Lloyd who gets a ton of disposals and gets a lot of the footy. I love Buddy. He's one of my favorite players, but he's definitely one of those that a lot of people love Buddy. So it's like I like the Rampies. I like the Justin McInerney's now for Sydney, because they're the workhorse guys, the guys that don't get a lot of pub, but they do a lot of things that really can help a team win. So to each their own. Everybody is different. So with a massive history, not only with the sample, but then Port having a lot of success coming into the AFL, what's your most memorable moment as a Port supporter?
Yeah, we've probably touched on a few of them just in the conversation. My most memorable moment as a fan in a game probably is that I was at that St Kilda prelim when Wangane kicked that goal on the boundary. That's 50-meter snap that won us that game. That was it. But then I think, as far as a moment, not just for the footy, but just the moment I experienced, I think that showdown win in 2018 when Motlop goals, when we've just given up we've blown a lead late, and I'm standing on the hill, and the hill at Adelaide Oval is an otherworldly place in of itself. It's opposition, it's general admission, so opposition fans can stand there, and then a lot of Port fans that just want to sink some piss and catch up with some mates will stand on the hill. And until we got seated memberships, that's just where we were. And the seated memberships mainly because my wife, just being shorter than me, couldn't see when standing on the hill, which was and the seated memberships have been nice the last year, but we were standing on the hill, and Motlop kicks that goal, and it's 20 seconds to go. And just everyone that has a beer in their hands, you celebrate, it just throws in there, and it becomes a shower, this cascading rain of beer and pre-mixed spirits as well. I think there was whiskey on me somewhere as well. Just everything, everyone throws it in the air, and it's just this amazing moment of, everyone. And Crows had just come off losing the grand final the year before, so it was a pretty big game at the time. We didn't realize how downhill they were going probably at that time. So, and for us, having added a couple of disappointing years, it was really great. So there was that catharsis in that goal. But then I find it amazing, and I still don't know what happened, but the siren goes 20 seconds later, and the same thing happens again. Beers and stuff get thrown up in the air. And I'm like, where did everyone just go? Did everyone just get another beer in the last 20 seconds? Like, how did this happen? It was just, I was just drenched, and I had to wash the game. Everything just was drenched and smelled like beer. But the drive home was still wonderful, even though it stank in the car, because it was just this moment that, it just couldn't be replicated. I still think just something otherworldly happened in that time. And like I said, the hill has a strange energy, strange and mystical energy in that sense, because it's it's a rare thing in Australian stadiums these days to have that, and it's a contentious issue because there's some politicians down here that say that no, just fill in that end and make it more appealing for a grand final. I'm like, no, I don't want a grand final in Adelaide if it means giving up that history, and that scoreboard obviously is heritage listed and is an amazing piece of history, and that the oval itself is it's unique in that sense, and I would never want to take that away, because those moments, that moment was just, obviously the win was just that goal and how it happened with the collision of Crows players at the 50, and then Motlop just steaming through and having that moment, the ears in the air twice in about 30 seconds was just, I don't know how it happened, and it was a wonderful moment to be a part of, even though it was quite sticky.
You say that just reminds me of watching like coverage of like a European nation like England or Croatia in the world, like in a World Cup or a European Championship. They have the big groups that are all behind the gates, and they score, and everybody's hands go up, and like you can see beers and everything going up in the air.
It was exactly
as soon
like
as you said that, that's
atmosphere.
the memory that pops into my head. I'm like, that's exactly what it would probably, but it'd be fun. It'd be crazy. You don't want to get pulled over by the cops, because then they're like, "Have you been drinking tonight?" I'm like,
Yeah,
So,
by process of osmosis, maybe because I'm covered in it, but
that's great. So we've done a little bit of the past. Let's go a little bit more to the present now. And for the way it ended, I know that I don't want to pull scabs here, but can you real quickly just what were your thoughts on last season? Like I know it was kind of an up and down season, some really highs and a few lows, unfortunately. So
Mhm.
what were your thoughts on Port's season last year?
Well, I thought we were up and down for probably half of the year, and the injuries were played a major part in that. And I was pretty critical of them for large portions of the year. Just inconsistencies. We could go on a 6 goal run, get a comfortable lead, and then in the third quarter suddenly be in a battle again because we've just kind of taken the foot off the gas. And so I didn't. There's a few structural issues I wasn't sure of, and I'm no coach or anything like that. So I'm not like a Hinkley basher, as some would say. I always say there's a subtle nuance, there's a subtle place as a fan that you can actually have a discussion about your teams, because there's always the people like, oh no, get him out, he's useless, he's a, and they go get personal and call him all sorts of names. I'm like, you can't do that. And then there's the people that blindly back. I'm like, I just want to be in the middle having a mature conversation about it. So it's an interesting thing with all fan bases have it, and whatever sport it may be, but I think but then later in the season, once we started getting those Zach Butters and Dersmers, and actually suddenly had a full strength side after for so much of the season. There was that one game against St Kilda, which in the middle of the year where we didn't even have a small forward to choose from because we just were that hit with injuries, and that was actually a good win. I was really proud of that win because we were so injury hit in that I thought we were going to lose that one, and we won it. So that was a great win. But then later in the year, we got players back. We started playing some real good footy. We beat Carlton by kicking 19 goals in a row, and I was like, that's how a good team is meant to beat a bad team. I was thinking that we're getting it together. Beat the Bulldogs in the last round of the regular season with that great, with the Bulldogs tumbling out of the top four by the end of the round 23. And I thought, okay, we've got an away win against a really good side, because the Bulldogs were a quality side all year and probably should have finished top two if they hadn't fucked up the end of the season. But so I was really hopeful. So at that point, I was really starting to get high on this team. And then we go and beat Geelong quite comfortably in the qualifying final, and it got red hot for me. I was just, this is our time, and all fans do this. If you get in that position, you go, this is our time. This is our time. We've had the heartbreaker last year in the prelim. We won't do that again. And we go and do it again in just horrible fashion. And I don't like, and Crows fans that wanted to give the troll, we're getting on and saying, "Oh, you got too far ahead of yourselves booking flights." I'm like, everyone does that. I had everything was fully refundable or accredited, so I was like, I got my tickets for a quarter of the price as to what they got to later in the closer to the prelim final. So it was a good deal, but I was expecting to be there, and so for the season to end that way, and if we'd lost a close one of the Bulldogs, I said they were a good team this year. I wouldn't have been, but to lose in that fashion was disheartening. And kind of, it was the worst loss for me since that 2007 one, which I've already said I've got plenty of PTSD about that still. This one, look, you get bad losses in finals like prelims throw up some also, Richmond should have won 4 grand finals in a row but they lost. They just blew that one against Collingwood in 2018. Yeah, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Richmond were the best team in the comp that year. They should have won that one, but they didn't. It happens. And they got blown out by Collingwood in that game when Mason Cox had his coming out party. So
USA. Sorry.
Yeah. I remember watching that one and seeing those chants, and it was,
I kid you not. There are so many people over here in the USAFL that after they heard that, they were like, we were recording it and literally showing everybody we could. We're like, people in Australia were chanting USA and there was a USA flag in the fans. We kid you not. We're like showing everybody over here. So that was one of those moments that there's not a USAFL fan or a USAFL player that did not know about what Mason Cox did that day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those that you were not going to get in. And I can almost guarantee you there was a lot of USAFL players that were cheering. They were barracking for Collingwood in that grand final. Even if we weren't Collingwood supporters, we were barracking just to see him win a medal, because we would have accepted it as part of our own. He may have never played a USAFL game. His brothers do now, but it was one of those moments where we're just like, we're like, yes, this, we want this because it gave us positive pub over here. So I
Yeah,
remember
and
but I completely agree with you. That Richmond team should have won. They were the best team in the competition the entire year. I went into that going Collingwood. They're going to be lucky to survive this. They're going to get run over like a lot of teams did, and they jumped Richmond, and they just never recovered. And it kind of was the same way with Port in this preliminary final. They got jumped early, and it was like they were shell shocked. It was like they could not believe what had happened. It was almost like they expected the doggies to come in and just roll over, pardon the pun there, but that literally was what it looked like. I couldn't believe what I was watching, because I was live streaming this with Ross, and I kept saying, I'm waiting for Port's reaction. I kept saying that. I'm like, I'm waiting. And it hit halfway through the fourth quarter, and I go, well, this one's done. And it was probably done a quarter and a half earlier, halfway through the second quarter, when it was like 50 points. But I literally kept thinking there was a way they were going to get a reaction. It just never came. And I think that was the most frustrating part for me, because full disclosure, I tipped Port to win the whole thing. I'll raise my hand on that one. I did.
Hey, me too.
Well, and it's because the fact that they were healthy at the time, and they went into the finals as one of the hottest teams going into the finals. They had won 4 or 5 in a row. They had just beat the Dogs. Yeah, we saw the Dogs had formed going into the finals. Wasn't that great? But Alir was playing really well. You had all your young guns back. Ollie Wines was playing out of his skin. Boak was playing well. Lysette was back and healthy and playing well. I legit thought this was the only team that could come in and disrupt the Dogs and the D's in the final. And it just never materialized. And that was frustrating for me, because they've got the talent. It's there. That just really, really sucked that they just did not show up in that preliminary final.
Yeah, and I echo all of that. We were, obviously being at the game, and I was just, it was about probably only 5 minutes in, they kicked the first couple, and I just sat there and I just slumped. I was like, I've seen this Port team before. I know what's going to happen. We're going to get. It happened a couple of times this year against the Dogs at home earlier in the year. We got, they kicked 4 or 5 goals before we got started, and at least we got back into that one for a bit. But Brisbane and West Coast did it to us in the away games this year as well. It's just it was a trend that if you get a jump on us, it's going to be we just lose our structures, and they didn't find a way to. They couldn't. It's one of those. It is one of those legitimate Hinkley criticisms. Is what do we do when these games go down like that? Is that it doesn't seem to be a plan B enacted, and maybe they're trying. It's just the other, and you've got to give the other team credit. In this instance, the Bulldogs, they just did what they had to do and kept up with it. They didn't actually let off, which was the real awe-inspiring part of it in a tragic sense. That I was just watching. I was like, oh, the Bulldogs are good. We should be able to, but they just kept. They didn't take the foot off the throat, so to speak. And that's what a good footy team does. And we should have been that team that day. And then look, Melbourne were really good this year and very deserving of the grand final. So I was worried about if we got through and we play in Melbourne. Particularly because I'd watched obviously Port, Melbourne had gotten through the grand final in the first prelim that Friday night. So they'd done that in pretty impressive fashion. So I was worried about it, but I was expecting us to be there at least to give it a shot, and to not even get through. It puts it at a, you could say, if you're going to put a letter grade on it, what is it? C's get degrees, I guess. I'd say D+, because it's not like it's a failure, an F, but to go out in that fashion, for me, after the last year, we were so close. And, there's the list of teams that have lost 2 home prelim finals in a row is very, very small. And to be part of that, Port are just making a good habit of having nice, or not nice, some negative finals records, whether it be grand final losses or, those kind of ones. So it is frustrating. I'm proud. I certainly have a lot of belief in this team going forward. It's just we've got to find a way through that barrier, and it feels like if we're going to lose a final, we find a way to do it in spectacular fashion as well. So it was rough. Whether it be it was a few years ago we lost that one in double overtime, and twice we had 10-point leads in it. We should have locked those ones up, but we didn't. And then the Luke Shuey duck and all that stuff. It's just like, fuck, we find ways to really just stick the knife into us fans. But I know the players. Boak was on the radio just in tears after that final this year, and that's what I always try to. It's as a fan, your immediate reaction is go. They didn't try. especially as a younger man, I didn't really think about it enough. And you'd go, oh, those fucking players didn't try. But, I know those guys are hurting pretty hard as well. And that's what's frustrating is, as fans, we want to find places to lay the blame. Players maybe do, and coach. And so, as fans, a lot of people just jump on Twitter and stuff and start abusing whoever they can. It's just like, that's not going to help at all. And that's what I tried to take the tact. I was like, we're all hurting. This sucks. Just try to, that's why I left my review podcast, I think, until like a week or so later. I was just like, no, I'm going to digest it and I'm not just going to jump on and react, because, and it's tough. But yeah, no, the season as a whole, it's a great finishing top four is what you want. So you'd say the regular season, give that we finished second, and you give that a solid A. The finals, that first final win was one of the best games I've seen Port play in a long time. It was a real complete win against Geelong. So that was, at that point you're at A+, but then just to go out in that devastating fashion, you have to give it you couldn't even give it a pass mark for that, because that's just, you can't do that at home. Last year was heroic because we were, losing to Richmond, I guess, who were going to go on to win their third in 4 years. But yeah, this year's season, great regular season, horrible finals, and unfortunately the finals is what's remembered, and that's what sometimes carries over. So that's what they've got, a big job ahead of themselves. They've certainly got the squad, the young talents coming through, some old heads, but Gray and Boak are. Boak says he could play till 40, and so you got to believe him at this point with how he's getting better at all the time. But Gray certainly, you can see his end is near. Unfortunately, he's going to be going around again next year, but he's like I said, his consistency isn't quite. He just can't do those things he was doing 5-6 years ago as regular as he was. And those guys, I want to see get a medal so bad. And I thought this was going to be the year, and it didn't happen. And yeah, the season. I'm still, as you can probably hear as I go back and forth, I'm still pretty conflicted about how I feel about it, because it's that finals loss is hard to reconcile with after what we felt like was building towards a pretty good point.
It's the one have you done for me lately type of moments as a fan. Like I'm almost in the same boat. Like you look at Sydney a little bit. It was the same thing. It was like there was no expectations on us, and we get a flyer to start the year, play really, really well, and we got into the finals, and legit, I thought we could get by GWS. We could make a run. Like I even knew some people that were like, Sydney could get to the grand final if they get the right matchups, even if they play Melbourne. Yeah. And the GWS game, we weren't hard enough. We weren't strong enough. And the fourth quarter, we butchered the ball in front of goal. That's plain and simple. So it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Mm-hmm. But then there's part of me that I can kind of pull myself away from the disappointment and focus on as whole. Like for me, maybe, and I'll take a stab at this for a Port fan. As a whole, it's a really good season because you played very good footy. You had some struggles, but you bounced back from them. I mean, you could have rolled over there after early in the season when you were struggling a little bit. You started losing, but you lose Butters, you lose some of your young guns to injuries early in the season that you could have rolled over. You could have just said, well, this just isn't our year. We call it a day. Nope. You bucked up towards the second half of the season. You go on that run to get to second in the finals. Yes, the finals bow out. I mean, sucks, but I mean, you played really, really well. You got another home grand final. You've still got a great list together. I mean, there's just as much positive. It's just, I agree with you. It's the way you went out. It's hard to forget. It's really hard to forget. And I think that's the most frustrating thing for me, because I saw that team potentially being a flag contender with Melbourne, but if you guys can stay healthy next year, I think the biggest key factor for me is Fantasia, Butters, your young kids. If they can stay healthy, which unfortunately they have had trouble with a little bit, they can stay healthy. There's very few teams with that lightning firepower that you've got. I mean, you have the Brownlow medalist and Ollie Wines. Does he have another good season like this next year? I think he can. He's a consistency beast now. He was consistent the entire season. If he does the same thing, it's scary. The biggest question I have for you is, how is your backup ruckman behind Lysette now that Laddams got traded? That's one that I'd be interested to see from a Port perspective. Do you have that backup in case Lysette does get hurt, or does the moving Laddams, does that hurt your team?
Yeah, there's obviously big. There's Port Twitter when the Ladham's trade thing started coming up was the big question. But the thing, our best and fairest winner in the Sandful competition in the Magpies is a guy that we drafted 4 years ago, Sam Hayes. He had a great year this year as a ruckman for the Magpies. He came in the same draft as Laddams, I believe. So he's young and like a lot of tall players, whether it be footy or a lot of other sports. They just develop that take that little bit longer to develop because you've got to work out how to use that big gangly body. But Hayes had a really good year and seems to have matured into a really good ruckman, and that's where the hopes I think a lot of Port see him as the future. I think that's why Laddams become a little bit expendable. I loved Laddams. I loved his energy. He's a great personality and seems to be well liked. And he could kick goals, go forward, kick goals, and kind of had that kind of game that was that dual threat ruckman when being able to go forward. But I think whether Port saw a ceiling there, I that there was I don't know where, and I think Laddams wanted to play more too. So yeah, you as a Sydney fan, you've got a really good, great player in him, and he's going to be great for the side. I just think Lycett's still got, I think he's 28, 29 now, so he's still got a couple of injuries aside, he's still got a couple of years, and I think Laddams is just like he's not going to. Laddams wasn't a consistent first 22 player, and that was the issue. Was like he's probably looking at that and. And I think Port go, no, we've got a good one in the wings in Hayes as the second. And then Finlayson coming in as also, there's the theory that he's going to be that forward that can pinch hit in the ruck as well. So they moved up the draft. They got another good player in Finlayson in, and they're, like I said, big raps on Sam Hayes. He hasn't played an AFL game yet just because the spot hasn't been there for him with Laddams being the second in command behind Lycett. But yeah, Hayes, there's a lot of love for Hayes at the club, and I think that's where they've kind of gone in that direction. But it's the tough business side of footy, isn't it? And that's why I never, when those players want to go home, people boo Dangerfield, which I boo Dangerfield just because it's fun to do it sometimes. No, I'm not a booer really, but when players want to go home, and but because they're your team's best player, like Dangerfield was for the Crows at that time. It's funny because you get snarky at the player and stuff like that, and clubs sometimes can be a bit snarky as well. Like Josh Jenkins and those blokes at the Crows were making comments about Dangerfield in the media when they were on their way to what they thought was going to be a grand final win. But then Port, the business side of it is players like Laddams. Who Laddams grew up as a Port fan. There's all these photos. I'm in a couple of Port groups on Facebook, and there's a couple of family friends of his posting photos of him in Port gear when he was 10, 12, 16. He loves this club, and so that's the business side of footy. And the other side is when a club sees a player as expendable, they'll trade him, and that's why I sit there and go, "No, we've just got to." It's unfortunate because I love Laddams. We make some badges and stuff, and we made one of him in the Ric Flair Nature Boy because he met Ric Flair once, and so he saw those and said, "Oh, those are great," and I sent him a couple, and he's a really good Port bloke. So that's the when we give shit to players that leave when they want to. The other side of it is players sometimes don't want to leave, but they get traded anyway. So it's it's a tough business, and that's why I always try to take the even keeled approach to say it's just unfortunate. It's just part of footy. Sometimes a player will want to leave, sometimes a player won't want to leave, but they'll get traded anyway. It's a two-way street with footy clubs. But yeah, I think your original question was what Port are going to do with the ruck. I've gone off on a tangent again, but yeah, no, Hayes is going to be the big one. I think this year if Lycett gets injured, but if Lycett stays fit, then it'll just be Finlayson and those other guys. Dixon. I don't want to see Dixon in the ruck again because he comes up limping every time. Mm-hmm. We just need to protect Dixon at this point because he looks. Sometimes you look like he's going to be out with a season-ending injury, and then he gets up 5 minutes later, but. Yeah, I think their plan is to kind of that pinch hit in the ruck stuff a little bit, and then Hayes will be the big one to come in if Lycett does get seriously hurt or he's out for any period of time. So,
yeah, well, and there's a little bit of is that now the Swans and Port have this nice little connection. The last 2 years, we've each traded a player to each other. You guys get a Lear from us. Yeah. We get Laddams this year, and it's like there was some fun, and I'll joke with you just a little bit about this. Is there were some people that were saying. Sydney wanted Laddams last year when we were looking for a kind of a permanent ruck. Exactly. Yeah. Sam Naismith. And it was like, there was almost part of me that almost goes, why didn't we just trade a Lear for Laddams last year? And I don't know, maybe last year they were looking at Laddams as being that guy. Maybe they weren't expecting Hayes to become the player that he did. So that's the reason that it happened. But hindsight's 2020. There's a lot of Swans fans that go, well, it ended up working out kind of nice because we get Tom Hickey, and Hickey has a season to remember last year. So,
Yeah.
and then this year we end up getting Laddams for a little bit different price tag and a little bit different. I'm interested to see. I think he's pretty much the understudy to Hickey this year. I think
Mhm.
he'll go forward to be the other big. He'll probably take the full forward role, while Buddy will move up to the center half forward role. I don't know. We'll have to see how that kind of goes. But it's it's been kind of fun because I joke with some of my Port people. I'm like, I have a little bit of love for Port because Alir was one of my favorites when he played
Mhm.
for the Swans. I thought he was an incredible player. I hated losing him because he was that big body defender that could defend a big body, but he was really good at intercept marks. So it was like I wasn't when they moved him, I was sad because I missed having him because he was such a great player. But I think he flourished at Port, and he was so much. I think he just did so well, and he's flourished there. And I'm happy for him that he's found a place that he can play the type of footy I think he always wanted to. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the thing with the trade like a year ago, I think Laddams just they don't think Port were quite ready to go this year. I guess with his contract being a bit back ended, it was a list management decision, sort of freeing up some salary cap space maybe, and then just last year they were probably a little bit more. They've had another year with him. They're probably just figuring, and then Hayes has come up. It's probably just those things that happen. You get another year, and this management decisions change. But yeah, it is funny that Laddams was. I think Laddams was the one that Sydney were looking at early asking prices before we settled on what we did with Alir. I think Laddams. I do remember Laddams' name being floated at the time. So it's funny how it works out. It's just a very extrapolated process in the end. But hey, we're super stoked with Alir as well, and then I'm hoping Laddam's going to have he's going to go on and have a good career and have a good impact with Sydney as well. It'll be best for both parties because he deserves a good shot. He was a good and like I said, a Port fan growing up, he provided us with some good memories here. So he deserves a shot and deserves to get the career he wants as well. So
yeah, we'll definitely have to see it. But I'll tell you this: the Swans fans that I've talked to are super excited to have him in. They know Hickey has maybe got a couple of years max, so I think we're super excited to have him. So who knows? Well, maybe both. This will end up being both for both of our clubs here. So I've said to a lot of people, I hate saying expectations for the next year because I feel it sometimes brings a negative connotations. But I always like to ask, what are your thoughts on next year, or do you have expectations, and kind of what are you looking at for next year with Port Adelaide?
the expectations at the moment, obviously, beyond catastrophic finals losses, our expectations are last since 2020 was a surprise year, and how quickly some of these young guys developed, and we got into real finals contention and prelim finals. We probably thought that was maybe only going to start this year, but 2020, whether it was just a magical combination of the year it was, unfortunately with COVID, but it did probably just they relished the weird year it was and found a groove, and they've continued that this year. So expectations are again top four at minimum. That's unacceptable if we finish outside the top four. Obviously, if knock on wood, as I do on my podcast a lot, if things happen and a bunch of players get injured, whatever, then that your expectations are fluid throughout the year, but base expectation, if all things go well and injuries are manageable, like just your regular usual things that happen, every footy club deals with them, but we've got to finish top four again and then have a good crack at finals. We've had the side and we've gotten ourselves to get two home prelim finals in a row. Shows that we've got a side that knows how to do the hard yards through the year and get the ladder position into the finals and then make it work. We've played some good sides in finals over the last couple of years, and beyond that West of Water result, actually played them pretty evenly. That Richmond prelim final last year and that shithouse night at Adelaide Oval with the rain and everything. We had chances to win that one, and against a side as good as Richmond has been up until this year. And then Geelong in two qualifying finals. You can talk about what you want about Geelong's list being an aging list at the moment, but they still finished top four both years, and we beat them twice in qualifying finals. So wrapping all that up over the last couple of years, I look, the expectation from Port fans, and whether it's expectation or hope, but with the side that's good, both of them are kind of the same. Kind of the same really. We wanted this side with how we've gone the last couple of years. We want to see them make a grand final. As you've said, the list is pretty one of the best in the AFL. Teams like Melbourne have discovered some stars this year, so that's what happens every year. Sometimes the team just discovers some stars and get to run on as Melbourne did, but we know our list is what we've got. And there's still some young players that haven't even got a shot yet. And, Lockie Jones, who is, a cult hero already, he had a couple of injuries this year, didn't really get a good run at it. But then we discovered how good, Miles Bergman, we discovered how good he is this year, and he grew into the year. Willem Drew as well. He's, there's so many young players, and then we've got the veterans that kind of balance it out. And then you've got all those players like your Fantasias and Alias and Wines and co that are in that 24 to 28 range that are right in the either coming into the prime of their careers or hitting it, as Wines is now. The list profile is really good, and my expectation is top four. If we don't finish top four and we don't have any major injury issues, I'd be saying that's an unacceptable failure. And that's it sounds cocky, but when you look at the list we've had and the success we've had over the last couple of years, barring those prelims, it's just that's what a team like Port should be. I'm not a fan that sits there and goes, because of our history we deserve to win. No, you don't. You have to earn. You don't get a free pass just because of your history. Your history gets you to where you are, but the future is unwritten. They've got to earn that as well. But at the same time, as a fan, I sit there and go, look, you've got all these examples of, this is that's the expectation from Port fans, is that if you are this good, I understand if a team's shit and then transition and rebuilding, then that's not what the expectation is. But with how good we are at the moment, our list profile and everything like that, we need to be finishing top four and look, I'd be pushing them hard to make, if they don't make a grand final again and have some disappointing finals exit, it will really start, you just start asking some questions. So expectation is absolutely top four, and then grand final is barring any unexpected things going on, it's just this list should be making a grand final.
Yep, completely agree there. And the best part is the way that answer was answered kind of transitions me great to my next question. Being an American, we love being a general manager, making all the decisions, making the trades, making the moves. So I love this question because I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to install you as the Port Adelaide list manager as we speak. The other 17 clubs in the country are completely open, so you can pick any player from any of the other 17 teams. Who's the first player you bring to Port and why?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there's multiple areas on the field that you'd sit there and go, okay, this is where we could hand. And then because you immediately start going, well, obviously in an open draft, your Dustin Martins and Bontempellis and Petrarca's become, big names. I'd love someone like, you'll hate this, but and maybe at his age now, maybe not so, but fuck, I've loved buddy Lance Franklin all my life. He's just, and I actually hadn't seen him in person until this year when Port played Sydney, and I'm sure you remember the game. It was a really good game, and Buddy went off in that fourth quarter and in the second half really, and almost won the game for them. He's just, especially with Port at the moment, and look, maybe no forward could fix it, because it's a Port fan thing at the moment for a long time now. Is a forward structure is always I love Charlie Dixon. I think when things don't go right for Port at the moment, the forward line is always where it starts a little bit. And the midfield, look, there's got some young guys coming through, like Jack Steels, I love as well. Bontempelli's probably, I like Bontempelli's one you would. I think possibly Bontempelli would be my answer. I have a lot of just his body as a midfielder and what he does. I know it's a funny one with Wines beating him out for the Brownlow, but being such a heavily goal scoring, what he does in the midfield alone is, but he kicked 26, 27 goals this year as well. Like, he's a real good goal scoring man. He can damage you on multiple fronts, whether it be what he does breaking out of the center. Like, watching him in person again this year at that prelim final, unfortunately, we weren't even sure he was going to play. And then I was watching him just bounce out of the middle time and time again as we just were completely overrun. He's just such an impressive midfielder to me, and just, his body he's just a really big body in there. But he's a real classy, good ball user as well. And like I said, can kick some massive goals. You can kick him from 55, no trouble. That's why some of those guys, defenders, where I love our defense. I wouldn't change any of our defense. Maybe last year I would have said Aaliyah, and then we got him. So so defend, and then midfield's pretty good, and so that's why I'm kind of between someone like Bontempelli and Buddy. I don't know which one I'd pick, but I just it's a frustration, and maybe it's just me being tired of the same issues over and over again. But sometimes we get beat up in the midfield a little bit when this year it wasn't. Wines really took over and did a good job. And once Will and Drew grew into it, it became less of a problem, I think. But then I watch us get completely dominated by that Bulldogs midfield and wonder, would it be nice to just get Bottom Belly to swap jerseys at halftime and see if we can help out a little bit. But forward, like I said, Buddy is probably one of the most special players I've ever seen play, and watching him in person and just how, he can damage you. And he's, there's often been the comparison done to guys like LeBron James in the NBA is like he's the kind of player that, he's a forward and kicks 1,000 or will kick 1,000 goals. The last one to kick 100 goals in a year, but he can damage you in so many other ways on the field as well. He can get in, he can take his time, have a little bit of time up the field and damage you in those ways and kind of play multiple roles. Maybe not so much these days, but back when he was younger, he was just a magical player that kind of transcended what we thought an AFL player could be. Kind of like, I don't know, LeBron's always been the one I've compared him to, just because he's just, what he can do with his body is it's just kind of transcends what you think they should be able to do. And LeBron's kind of been like, he does so many things that you don't expect to play. He can play so many different roles, and Buddy's been like that for so long, and just a magical player to watch. And yeah, I think maybe Buddy, just to swap out one of the, and look, I've got high hopes for Port's forward line with but Dixon's aging and Marshall actually does a lot of unsung things that people don't notice, but he's a scapegoat a little bit. George Yardies is going to be a special player, but shit, then things go down. It's just, yeah. If I could have anyone, if you could take Buddy at maybe 25, like if I could have an age thing as well, if I could take Buddy at 25, I just don't think, he's a game-changing player, like no other. I think I'd even take him over your Dustin Martin at 25 or anyone. I just think Buddy's just he's so much more special than any other player, just with what he can do and how he can damage you and kick in those bags of goals that he can. And even at this age, this year, he had I don't know, I didn't watch as much Sydney probably as you did, but shit, he had a pretty good year for a player that hadn't played for a couple of years and still is dealing with injury issues and obviously doesn't have the body to keep up with what he wants to be able to do. But he was still such a good player this year, and yeah.
He shocked me with how many games he played this year. Like I legit at the start of the year said I don't see him playing more than 2 or 3 games in a row without being rested, just because he had that whole season where he had the injuries, and he comes back and plays like 12 in a row and had one little injury scare with a bone bruise after in a either GWS game where him and Connor Iden bumped knees and had a bone bruise and missed a game after that. But other than that, he didn't have any injury issues. There's no lower body injuries this year. He slimmed down. If you look at him from 2 years ago and look at him this year, he's dropped probably at least good 10, 15 kilos at least, just because of the fact that I think it was best for his body. I think his legs, he got too big and he was almost too powerful. So I think that was what was causing him some of his lower body injuries, because you can tell he slimmed down. He was not nearly as big. And I think that really helped him this year. And the scary part is you put him at center half forward. He's just as dangerous a field kick as he is a goal kicker. So imagine Charlie Dixon leading to a Buddy Franklin kick. So I like that call there. Even nowadays, Buddy is probably still not a bad option at center half forward with Dixon as your full forward. So I like how you went there. I'm very interested on this one because a lot of the people that I've chatted with are Melburnians. So being a South Australian, I'm very fascinated on this one. The grand final saw 2 years outside of the beloved MCG this year, being at the Gabba and Perth and being an outsider. I thought they were very well done. Not everybody loves the night grand final. I know, comment section, calm down. But I really want to know, because I was really surprised to hear the Vic-based media talking about how they kind of liked the grand final being outside of Victoria and not at the MCG. So I ask you this: are you one of those that you like MCG grand final 2:30, or did you mind not only a traveling grand final but even a night grand final, almost a little bit Super Bowl stylish?
Yeah, it's quite a taboo subject in Melbourne to even just consider the fact that it might be an okay thing to move it around. Look, I'm it's not a fence sitting position quite so much, but it's always been a thing where I would love it to see maybe, every other year if you wanted to keep the MCG happy, and then rotate it around. But I'm just like, if the MCG's got this deal that looks like it's locked in, so I'm
50
it's
years.
for
I
me
know.
in Adelaide. It's an 8-hour drive so it's actually I've done the drive to the MCG for the Cricket World Cup final in 2015. It's something I know and can do, and know it's a lot cheaper travel for. It's going to be anywhere and not Adelaide. The MCG is actually the closest location, so it's the best travel option for any Port or Crows fan. Though hopefully they don't have to worry about it for another 50 years at least, in my lifetime anyway. But it's but yeah, I don't mind the idea of it. I had ticket. I was going to go to both of the away ones until Port got knocked out prematurely. So I would have loved to have been there, even just as the spectacle of seeing it in another state. But it wasn't cost effective to go unless it was my team in it. So, I'd love to see it every other year if I could have an option that's appeased both. Not that I want to appease the VFL/AFL, because I have a lot of issues with how Victorian centric the league is still, and but I don't mind the tradition of the MCG. But then I think Optus Stadium looks like that's one of our top away trips that me and the wife want to do at some point, is get over to Perth for an Optus Stadium Port away game, because that stadium looks incredible. And then just there's the Gabba. While it's an older stadium, it's still a good stadium, and Sydney and Adelaide, obviously Adelaide Oval is a wonderfully historic ground. There's just grounds. Every state has got a ground that would be wonderful to hold a grand final at. The AFL wants to sell tickets, so stadium sizes and stuff might be the issue. But if it's just purely based on sport rather than business, then every state can put on a great grand final if they get the shot. And it would be wonderful to see them all get the chance. Whether it's nighttime or daytime, again, I love the tradition. I love the tradition of the MCG, because I grew up with that, and it was wonderful. And even though I was 16 when Port won in 2004, so my dad did give me a couple of beers at the end of the game, saying, congrats on your team winning, and so I didn't get to do the party thing afterwards. But that's the big issue some people have, is they want to have plenty of time to piss on after their team hopefully wins, I guess. But you can do that you can do that at night time too. You just go out to the clubs until 5 a.m, which you might do anyway at the two. They were all like, oh, we need plenty of time to celebrate. It's like, take a week off, celebrate. If your team's winning a grand final, if you're worried about the semantics of whether it's your plans for the night, just enjoy the fact your team's won it. It doesn't really matter. A nighttime grand final provides a great spectacle, in the sense of, because nighttime, like you said, the Super Bowl esque bands playing, and the nighttime lights and all that stuff provides a great as a TV watcher, it's quite, the aesthetics of it are quite nice. And then if you're at the game, I'm sure it's wonderful too. So I would, if you could have the MCG traditional one every 2 years, and then move it and have your kind of wild card one every other year, and that would be fine by me. Any plan they put forward doesn't matter for me, because if my team's in it, I'm going to get there no matter what. So yeah, it's a funny one that people get really, I saw Brendan Favola, like the former Port Carlton forward, and short time at Brisbane as well. He tweeted he tweeted something like, "I'm in bed at 7:30. Kids are in bed at 7:30. What am I going to do about it? I'm not going to be able to watch the game." I'm like, Brendan Favola's in bed at 7:30. No, you're fucking not. Shut up.
and that's one of those. I heard that argument a little bit too, and I'll do my little rant on this too. Is everybody's like, well, the kids need to go to bed at a certain time. I'm like, seriously, it's a Saturday night. You've got Sunday to sleep in.
Mm-hmm.
Shut up. I mean, when I was a kid, I would stay, if the Super Bowl was on and I wanted to watch it, my parents aren't going to make me go to bed at 8:00 on a Saturday night. I don't get that argument. Personally, I don't. Now, I understand if they're 5 years old, they maybe have to have a certain bedtime, but they're not going to specifically remember that one. I'm talking 8, 10, 12. I mean, let them stay up and watch the grand final. Let them sleep in the next day. You can skip one day of church. Everything's going to be fine. Relax. So it's just, I don't, for me, like personally, and again, the AFL doesn't give two flying whats and two flying shits about people over here in the States, but the game time, a night grind time grand final, is a little more difficult for people over here, because it's 3:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30 ish. So it makes for a long night. you either go to bed and take a nap and wake up, or you stay up the entire 24 hours basically. So it's one of those that decision's never going to be made for us. So I know it's going to all come down to that. But I think financially, I think eventually it's going to be a permanent 7:30 kickoff, because I think that they get higher ratings and finances even back in the MCG. That's my gut feeling. I know a lot of people don't like it, but that's my gut feeling, is this is eventually going to be a night thing from now on. So
Yeah,
all
there's
righty, we
certainly
jump.
plenty of people that are talking that way and trying to push the narrative that way to make the AFL make those decisions. So, but yeah, no, I completely agree with your sentiment about that. I remember my first year living in Oregon, going to college over there. I went to a Super Bowl party, so with some, some friends that are now, one of them was groomsman at a wedding. I made some great friends over there, but I went to college the next day and fell asleep in class. I
Mhm.
was like, I didn't just think about the fact, because grand final in Australia, growing up with you going out in the piss and you have something there to recover. And I did the same, took the same tactic to a Super Bowl, and then remembered I had a class
Tiny
at
bit
10 a.m. the
different.
next day, and the professor he was thankfully a good professor that kind of just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Having a good nap?" And I'm sorry, just tired. Super Bowl. He said, "Yeah, no, all good."
At least you didn't get stuff stacked on your head or put lipstick on you. I've seen that
Yeah,
happen
yeah.
too. Well, we won't go there. So, all right, we go to the next one. And for me, you and I have a fun little one with this next conversation. Is I'm a huge advocate of the AFLW. I did
Mm.
AFLW round reviews. I think that the game is getting better and better. I think the skills of the ladies is getting better and better now that more and more pathways for young girls to be able to play footy have been established and have been nurtured a lot more. So, do you keep an eye on the AFLW? And if you do, how excited are you that your Port Power will eventually have an AFLW side? I know not this year. I know a little bit of sweet, but next year the Port Power will join the league. And I will throw this one as a little caveat. Do you think Erin Phillips jumps ship, since her father was a great for Port Adelaide?
Oh, I bloody hope so. That's what we're all we're all needling. It's even got into some radio shows, and when Port got announced, and someone was saying, I think one of the Crows guys that's on a morning radio show here went on a rant just saying, "You've got to protect Darren. She can't go to that club." And I'm like, mate, she's her entire footy career and who she, her footy fandom was put. She was actually pictured in some Port media about 5 or 6 years ago, when Port were doing the 12 days of Christmas thing, when Port were starting to say we're going to try and get a team in when this competition happens. She was the first one to sign up, and she was pictured in a Port Guernsey. So you can search on the internet. And then obviously Port went a different direction with I think there was a business decision. They basically just went, the money wise, we need to pursue the China strategy, when we'll see how the AFLW goes. And people can criticize the China strategy all they want. It's actually done really good stuff for their sponsorship stuff. Um, but yeah, so that's pretty much. I think if we had the team in at the same time as the Crows had been the first one, she would never would have ended up in those colours, those putrid effing colours. They're actually the state colours, so it's the color. It's just the people. It's just the club that wears them. But yeah, it's. I certainly hope she jumps ship. And I think, look, I don't know. I think she's got a contract through this season, and that's it. And then that'll be. I think the talk will fire up after this current season finishes up. And I think I'm hoping she either comes across as like a player coach, because I think she's probably coming towards the end of her playing days. She's a freak of an athlete. I mean, the fact she had an entire, she's had a career in the WNBA as well, and then come over and had an incredible career once this AFLW got going. But yeah, I'd love to see her, even if it's just coming in as a coach, or some role at the club would be wonderful. And yeah, she can finish off her career where it all started for her, when she was going out in her dad's, Greg's shoulders when he's lifting cups with the Magpies and all that stuff. Would be a nice bookend to the career, and we can just, as Port fans, we can all just forget about the last couple of years. Though she has been great for the competition, she's it's begrudgingly, I have to accept that she's done a wonderful. Like, just her as a player and a person, and as a focal point, and a face for the league. She's been so wonderful for her. I am proud, even though it's in those colours, to see someone that's come from such Port heritage be that face for the competition. It's been wonderful to see her and have that success, because she does. Yeah, I remember watching the slowdowns when they did the charity matches, and she'd come out and play in the Port versus Crows one. You could tell that she could play footy if she got the chance at a level like this, and she finally got that chance. So I am happy for her in that sense. It's just it does burn quite deep to watch it happen in those colours. Yeah, as far as how much to keep an eye on it, I've obviously, without Port having it, I keep an eye on it pretty as, I guess, a passive observer, because I don't have a rooting interest. I was never going to, I root it was whoever's playing the Crows was who I was rooting for in the last few years. So, it sucks seeing, because all the Crows fans getting on saying, "Oh, we're winning all these premierships in the AFLW," and you just don't have a comeback because you don't have a team. So we're both incredibly excited. My wife, she's from LA and she's played soccer most of the last few years, but she's actually switching over to playing some footy locally the last year, and it's wonderful for her to see have these, be able to talk about, we've signed up as foundation members for the Port, and like as soon as the AFLW foundation membership dropped for Port, we signed up straight away. So I don't even know what we get with that apart from a pin and a welcome certificate, but I think we get something towards when they release their packages next year. But it didn't matter to me. I was like, a way to support this club coming in. Women's sport as a whole, I've always been an advocate for the fact that the amount of idiots that you trolls on social media, they go, "Oh, they're not nearly as skilled, they're not nearly as this." I'm like, well, give $1 billion league to women and watch what happens. These NBA's had 75 years of history, as they're celebrating this year, of building up the skill level, of professionalizing. Give women the same chance, and they'll be playing the same. It'll be just as good. That's the reason that the women's leagues, that people think the skill isn't there, and it actually, if you watch it enough, like the NWSL has been wonderful to watch grow the last 10 years. We go to plenty of women's league, or actually it's just A League now. Thankfully, they've changed the soccer league over here. Has just tried to make it the same name for both. So A League women's over here. We've gone to a few, and we've seen the skill level grow every year, and the likes of Sam Kerr do like what they're doing because they're getting the support, the financial backing, and all those things. Even though it's still not nearly as much as what the men's get, but it will get there as long as they keep getting the support. And we've seen that in AFLW as well, is that the league has grown in skill, and they're adding teams every year, and it's still growing in skill. So you give the women the chance and the money, and because a lot of them are still studying and working as well. Like they're not even fully professional in the same sense as the chance that men's are getting. So give them the same chances. That skill will grow. But what's incredible is the skill is there even when they're not getting the same chances, because they've really got to work hard for it. And I can't wait to see it grow. And I'm very happy that Port will actually be able to go to games of Port, because it's not because it was, so I wasn't never going to go and support the Crows team. Sorry, even an equality stance can't get me over the rivalry line. But I'm absolutely stoked to see the women's sports across the world growing and getting the chance that they deserve. I've always reading up on soccer history. I remember stories about back in the 1800s when soccer was first starting as a sport. The men were playing on fields with trees in the middle of them sometimes. So we all start from somewhere, but the men's leagues got the chances to professionalize and get to the point they are now and be those behemoths of leagues and industries they are, and the women get the same chance. They'll get there as well, because they're already way more skilled than a lot of people give credit for as well. It's amazing. I'm an Oregon alumni. Sabrina Ionescu is just a freak of an athlete and one of the best basketball players in the world. And I say that and just say she's one of the best basketball players in the world. You'll get those trolls on the internet go, "No, she's one of the best women. She couldn't hold a candle." I'm like, no, don't. She's one of the best players in the world. You just accept that. We're not going to get a chance to see her play against, your LeBrons and stuff, but she's the best at what she does, and she does it. And so just, accept that she's one of the best in the world and actually get her against LeBron and see what happens. The different people and games, but man, I get sick of all those arguments about women's sports, because I truly believe that all these sports will get to the same level if they get 100 years of the backing that men's have, because men have gotten it just because, not to get into, societal issues and stuff, but, we all know why men's sports have gotten to where they've gotten. So give the women the same chance, and the AFLW will get there and it is a wonderful league already, and it's just going to continually flourish.
I 100% agree. My favorite response to those trolls is it's like, did you watch footy in 1900? No, you didn't. So how do you know that 1900 was as good as it is now? And that was 7 years into professional leagues. So how can you sit here and tell that they're only in their 7th season? 7 seasons as a professional. That is the equivalent of the AFL in 1900. stop talking like you know, because you don't. It's not the same. You can't equivalate it. It is different. And if you're really honest too, the AFLW game is different. It's 16 on 16 aside. The
Mm.
rules for out of bounds are different. So it's a completely different game. So you don't sit here and say that they don't have the same skill. It's like they don't have the same coaching, because they don't have the coaching experience. They don't get the same coaching that the men's do, because they're not professional. Calm down, give it some time to progress. Trust me, it will get there. I
The
100%
scores of some
agree.
of the first AFL games back in the 60s, 70s, it was sometimes like 2 points to nothing or something.
Hmm.
There were soccer
Exactly.
scores. So all the these sports have to grow from somewhere, and certainly like you said, they're early into it, and they're leaps and bounds ahead of where the men's leagues were at the same starting point. So
Exactly.
I'm super stoked to see Port in the competition. They deserve, Port, like I said, with their history and everything, we want to be at the forefront of whatever leagues can have a Port Adelaide representative in them. So it's been probably one of the sore points for us, like, me and my wife, is like we want to see Port in the AFLW for the last few years. Ever since the competition got started, really, we wanted to support the league and the sport, but we're not going to a cruise one. I'm sorry, we're just not.
not
We're
a,
not. We're not doing it. So,
not a
like I said, I
problem.
supported whoever played them wholeheartedly.
That's awesome. You cannot get past the rivalry. That's not a problem at all. So I like to have a lot of fun, a few fun questions towards the end, just because um I think it's a good way to kind of connect it, especially considering there are a few things that I want to get over to Australia as soon as I can to see a game professionally. So I got a couple of things to help me out a little bit. When you go to the footy, when you go to a game at the Adelaide Oval or even local footy, what's your go-to food when you go?
Local footy, if there's chips and gravy on offer, that's my go-to, because it's just, especially local footy, like your local league just around the towns here. Chips and gravy is always just a nice, because it's often like a cold day. You're not getting any protection from the elements because there's no stands at the local. So chips and gravy is warming. It's tasty because it's fries, chips and gravy. Like, you can't go wrong. Um, AFL, Adelaide Oval, the main concession stands, the hot dogs and chips and all that, are pretty standard fare. There's nothing special about them. But at Adelaide Oval, and long may it continue, there's a little Indian food stand right next to the scoreboard, the historic scoreboard. You see, if you're watching it, you see a little Indian food stand there. Butter chicken and some naan bread with some rice. It's actually a really good quality feed. So that's our go-to now. Since we discovered that, there's a couple other food stands that periodically are there, but that one's been there consistently for years now. Whenever there's an AFL game on, and that's, again, it's the fact that it often, being AFL, it's often a cold day, so some warm Indian chicken, butter chicken or whatever, with some rice, and then the naan breads are really good for dipping in this leftover sauce, which there's usually plenty of. So that's been our go-to. I'll often get a bucket of chips, because usually I've had a few beers before I've headed into the stadium. I need that little bit of soak up. If you get the chips fresh, they're good, but often they put them under the warming lights. I'm not selling Adelaide Oval too well, but I do have. That is one of my. That is one of my things. I'm like, I've been to. Like, I've done a lot of travel. I've been to stadiums, a lot of US sports and stuff, and garlic fries at whatever the San Francisco Giant Stadium is named now. I don't know what it is.
Levi
Oracle Park.
Stadium, I think, or something to that effect,
Was it?
whatever.
Okay. Anyway, I've had some of those, Dodger dogs, all that kind of stuff, and so I know stadium food can be done better, even though it's still, it's still not Michelin star shit, but it is one of the things that I sit there and go, Adelaide Oval, you can do better. So that's why I go to find the stands, your Indian food stand, or a few of the other ones that are at the back end behind the hill there. That's where you'll find some of the good food, and it is really good. It is actually genuinely good. So there is some options there at Adelaide Oval for the more discerning eater. But like I said, the fries will still soak up your beer just fine.
Awesome. So another one is I haven't had a chance to see a game in a stadium, in a cricket ground. So for you, where's your ideal place to watch the footy?
It's an interesting one, because it depends what experience you're looking for. We've actually found, you know, being up in the stands a bit is actually not too bad. You're a bit further away from the action, but if you're like, kind of find that kind of, it's kind of like the equivalent to the, college football or the NFL. If you find around the 50 meter, 50-yard line, or 50 between the the center circle line, if you get it up in the stadium, so the second tier, you get a real good overview of like, so you can see a little bit more of the structural things that are happening if you look off the ball and you watch around, and you can see how the ball's flowing a lot better. But for me, we've got our season tickets about, where are we? Oh, should be
where we were. Pulls the tickets out.
Row P, section 140. So we were row P, so however many letters back that is. 20 odd rows. But I found that good because we see, you don't see the overview so much, but I like being close enough that I can hear what's going on, hear a little bit of the chatter on the field, but be back far. I actually don't mind being down the front to really get a bird's eye view of guys jawing at each other or whatever. It's always fun to see what's going on real close up. But we got those ones to be a bit back so we can see a little bit of the overview. We still keep an eye on the screens a fair bit to see what's going on at a better level, because you do not see so much of what's going on like over the other side of the field, like your opposite side of the field. You're just not going to see what's going on positionally quite well because you are kind of a little bit flat to the field. So if you're wanting a good overview of your first game, I'd go like a section up and like around the middle, because then you get that real good overview. You're not close, but if you want to get smell the players a little bit, it's certainly fun being down like front row to, just hear, and you get a real feel for the physicality of the game. And because often you get those contests on the boundary and guys are crashing in the fence right in front of you, and you even just this year, like I hadn't seen Christian Petrarca in person before. Like the Melbourne Port game this year in the regular season was the first time I'd actually been to a game where I'd watched Christian Petrarca in person. Fuck me, that bloke close up is he's just a beast of it. I just didn't realize how he's just shoulders and just an impressive human being. Like just as a specimen of what humans can create. But he's just an amazing player, and seeing him close up was, and I wasn't going to quite get that if it was high up. So it depends what you're looking for. But I certainly, having gone to sports, like gone to NFL games for the first time and stuff, I found it quite good. Like being up a bit as a fan, going to sports over there, and whether it be soccer as well, being high up and seeing, and just not quite high up, so you're in the nosebleeds and catching some snow, but just that middle tier where you can just get an overview of the field and get a real good feel for what's going on in the game in person, because you still hear a lot more of what's going on and see a lot more off the ball stuff, because you obviously you can see it yourself rather than relying on TV camera. So yeah, the couple of finals we went to this year, because we had to, do the ticket ballot or buy your tickets through. We got stuck up in the second tier both times, and my wife said, she was like, "Oh, it's good change being up here," because she got to see a little bit more of the game. Even though we like our seats quite close up, we enjoyed that change of pace just to see a bit more of the game again. Which that's why I still watch the replays when I get home, because I've missed half the game sometimes sitting close up. So. Yeah, it depends what you're looking for, but I highly recommend if you're coming and want to see the game properly, you get that middle tier and find that spot that's a good viewpoint for seeing the entirety of the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's one of those that I've seen some of the second tier looks like perfect for me. Like even if I wouldn't even be surprised. I even thought about being behind the goals, because then you can see the movement from one way to another, which I think would be fascinating. Maybe it's because I've seen the vision on some of the Fox Footy shows where they show behind the goal vision, which sometimes they look like ants, but it's still, you can see where the ball moves, how everybody moves in certain ways. So like the structure is set up that way. So for me, maybe it's my coaching. Like I thought that would be kind of a good way, but I've also heard midfield, because then you can see forward both ways. So depending on how you want to go. So yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I know it won't be easy, but I really want to one of these days. So I've said it numerous times that this is a channel that's primarily American sports, NFL, NBA, MLB. But occasionally we'll get some Americans that'll click on these footy videos trying to figure out what footy is. So I thought as a good idea, in case an American has clicked on this video and they've listened to the kind of the history of Port, I thought, why not take this opportunity to give us your best pitch on why you think an American fan should be a Port Adelaide Power supporter.
I mean, first thing, Google the most successful club in Australian football, and you'll see the answer right there. But look, it's not only the reason to be, some people would say that's a glory hunting tactic, but hey, we've got the history. So the other thing beyond that is the history. The history has created a culture, and it's a culture of both expectation of success then also the Creed, which was written by Foss Williams back in '62. I think I got the year right. I should, but it was basically the central thesis of the Creed was, if we leave everything on the field, have made all the efforts to win at a in a not heroic way, but just all effort of human endeavor, sorry, is the words he uses, has been left on the field, and you've still lost. There's an honor in losing if you do all these things. So there's a culture of respecting the opposition. Graham Corns would say no, particularly with being smacked around by Dave Granger back in the 80s. But Port Adelaide certainly has a history of maybe not respecting the opposition, but it's also that was some good fun part of our history too. But it is a culture that absolutely expects winning and demands it, but also understands and respects when you do it. And that's the I guess you can look at our last two prelim finals as examples. We were disappointed last year against Richmond, but we accepted it because we knew we could see the effort out in the field. And the Bulldogs lost was the other side of the coin, where there's a lot of demand for answers and inquiries because we saw that it just wasn't good enough. So, but as to be a part of that that's what I think makes it such a strong culture, and why we bounce back from these things like 119-point losses, as well as have great success, is because despite all that, there's such a strong culture and history there that it can withstand anything. It's 151 years of history now. We've gone through it all. There's a great documentary out there called The Rover of Tobruk about, Bob Quinn, who won 2 Magarey medals at Port, either side of World War II, where he then went over and was awarded the Medal of Valor or something like that in his efforts in World War II, because, there's all that history there of these players, and they bring that. And not to make war and footy the same thing, but there was and that's the kind of history that the likes of Bob Quinn have brought to Port. That is, you as a player, is a leadership aspect of, because I think there was a story about Bob Quinn that there was a bloke in the trenches that was actually just not wanting to, he was just shell-shocked and scared, and he said, this bloke isn't anywhere like less a hero, because it is heroic to know that your limits have been reached. And so it's like all of Port's history is littered with people that understand that winning is everything, but it also, you can't always win, and you need to accept when you don't, as long as the efforts have been made. And so I think in that, I can't try quite word it the right way, but there's a real good culture that comes from that kind of understanding of sports and life in general, and everything that happens in life. But beyond all that, there is a shitload of success that's come with that, with those, because you've had people like this throughout the history of the club that have taken these kind of tacks from life, whether it be Bob Quinn's experiences in war. Obviously, doesn't equate to footy whatsoever, but he also does that kind of leadership that he had at Port. He took to the war and then came back and took to Port again, and it was like that was the element, the person that was. And your Foss Williams and your John Cales and all those guys that have come through since have have put their next brick on the layer of the big wall of success that Port have been building over the years, and then that's continued. And the story of us even getting into the AFL was fighting against the odds. All other clubs in the SANFL took us to court and wanted us kicked out of the league, and the Crows were formed directly in response to that when we tried to get into the league the first time. We took that, we won another 4 or 5 grand finals, and then got into the AFL anyway, because it's a persistence of history and success, and not just keep on going when the going gets tough. The tough get going, and that's what Port has done over the years, is that while there's been lots of success, there's also been a lot of barriers to our success as well, and we've jumped over those without, not by, just by keeping true to Port Adelaide tradition, rather than kicking and screaming. It's just, we just keep doing what we do. Everyone else can do, it's white noise, whatever else, and Port Adelaide can just keep being Port Adelaide and find a way through. And, that's to bookend what we were talking about earlier with Port's season. That's just what we're going to do again. It's been a disappointing end to the season, but there's 151 years of history to show that it will always be another chance to right those wrongs. And that's, it's a footy, I guess that's a sports analogy in a whole. There's always another season. But for Port Adelaide, that culture and history has fomented something that's quite unique to any other club in the country. And I think that's what's so wonderful. And then, even just coming to the Port Adelaide area and region is such a strong part of South Australian history. It's at the forefront of progression and a lot of progressive issues in Australia, such as issues of race and stuff like that. There was a lot of people that worked in the Port Adelaide wharf areas that were really forefront of pushing pushing forward in the issues of social issues in the history of the state and the country. A lot of that being a port, it was a melting pot of different cultures and peoples, and that's a wonderful part of it. Even the Port Adelaide area is a wonderful place to just go visit, and taking the Maritime Museum or all the sorts of museums and the historic pubs and stuff, and the great little area of the city, and then the Port Adelaide Club itself, just up the road at Alberton. The footy oval, the stands there, it's been there for 140 years. It's just steeped in history, and despite the fact that we play in at Adelaide Oval and all the modern touches to the AFL that sometimes feels like it takes away, you realize how much Port is embedded in their history and are proud of their history, and welcoming of all at the club as well. It's just been wonderful seeing this year someone is waving around I can't think of which flag it is. It's one of the LGBTQ flags in the fans, and they were welcomed, and that was really a big part of I think she posted in one of the groups I'm on, and was just said how nervous they were about like waving the flag, but then just how it's just a club that's always just been at the forefront of all these things, and I'm just so proud as a fan to be a part of that, and to have all that history, and whether it be the on-field history, the off-field history, and all those things that make the fan culture so strong as well. It's a wonderful club to be a part of. Even with the bloody massive losses, you still wake up in the morning, I'm a Port fan. It's going to be all right. It's good.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. We've come to the last question. And for me, this is one of my favorite questions because I love hearing the differentiation of what people think of this. What is your favorite game of footy that you have ever seen? It doesn't have to be a power game. What is your favorite game of footy you've ever seen? TV, live, doesn't matter.
Shit, I mean, it's hard to go past some of the power ones I've been at because there's been some pretty special ones with those showdowns. Actually, I'll go to another showdown just because it's another one that anyone listening, if they haven't seen it, they can go back and watch. I was at this game, and it was the Angus Montfrey. It was the last showdown at Footy Park, or Amy Stadium as it was known then. And it was Angus Montfrey's. It was Port were down by about 15, 20 points with probably about 5 minutes to go, and they made a comeback, and one of those goals was Angus Montfrey snapping from the 50 line, and the ball bounced. It should have gone through for a point, but it bounced and went at an absolute right angle, as is the unique nature of the AFL, the AFL football, and how you can score is that it bounced, in the middle of the points section and bounced towards the goal and rolled through for a goal. And it was just another amazing showdown comeback, and that got us within a goal. And then a couple of minutes later, they kicked, and I think it was Angus Montfrey's again, kicked inboard to Chad Wingard, who was in his first season, I think, at the time, and having a breakout game. I think he kicked his fifth and final goal for the game to put us ahead with about 30 seconds. It's amazing how many showdowns end this way. But yeah, that was probably my favorite game that like I said, I've watched that showdown from 2018 a lot just because it was a more modern one. It's on my streaming app at the moment, just as one of the classic games to watch. But that showdown in 2013, being the last one at Footy Park, it was like the end of an era for me as a fan. We're seeing that stadium become obsolete from the AFL, and even though I was welcome to the Adelaide Oval move, it was one, and then just being a showdown that again we weren't expected to win. I don't think at the time, although no, we were having a pretty good year. We were starting to really kick on, being Ken Hinkley's early times, and it's just again one of my great memories. I guess if I was going to throw a random one out that isn't a Port game, that West Coast Collingwood grand final, and how that ended and how that started, and the fact that I just love giving Collingwood fans shit. It's obviously Port and Collingwood have an interesting rivalry as well, being the histories of the two clubs and colours and magpies and all those things. So yeah, but that game was just there's been a lot of great grand finals. I'd probably just name it the 89 grand final. Obviously there was only one then, but I've bought the DVD because there's so much lore. That's actually probably, if I'm just going to watch a game that doesn't involve Port again, that's probably the one I watch the most. It's just, there's so much in that game that is actually you need to frown upon, because it's just football shouldn't end with people almost dying. Like was it Dipper that went to with punctured lungs and all? I can't remember. It was Dipper. I can't say his name properly, but guys going to hospital with
Domenico.
punctured
I
lungs,
don't
and
think. I think it was because Dermot gets taken
Dermot
out,
got knocked out straight away because
and
the
he had broken ribs right
yeah
off the bat because they moved him from the midfield to the full forward, and he pretty much played full forward the rest of the game.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Dipley Domenico. I'm not sure whether
I'd have to look at
it
that
was
anyway.
him or
But yeah, there's
Dermy.
just people that were just getting these horrific injuries, and it was going like
Oh yeah.
it was pent up aggression from games earlier in the year. I know Dermot had laid someone, the player that laid Dermy out. He'd said I watched some documentary about it. Something earlier in the year had happened where he'd said something to him, and he just was like, "No, this is what's happening straight off the bat." And it's just
Mm-hmm.
there's so much of it is actually something you shouldn't, as modern sports fans, understanding how concussions. I mean, John Platten. There's a lot of concussion issues. I mean, sure, the NFL is far ahead of of the AFL as far as their understanding of concussions. Although the NFL still tries to block block it a little bit, but AFL has that too. There's a little bit more coming out the last few years where people are starting. Shane Tuck, his tragic death, was it last year or the year before? They've done studies in his brain that's been clear, the CTE stuff. So you look at that 89 grand final and go, that's horrific, but it's fascinating to watch. It's like you've just got to understand it as a time capsule of what the AFL was then, what sports was then. Understand that yes, we shouldn't be condoning any of this, but it's a fascinating watch. It's just as a human to watch players actually. It's not heroic to go out and smash, but it's kind of there is I guess it's a dumb heroic nature that's just to be able to go out there and say, all right, I'm probably going to get lit up out in this game, but it's just what we've got to do. This is what's going to happen. And that Hawthorn team is a juggernaut at the time, and Geelong should have probably won a grand final in that 10-year period, even like into the 90s, with Ablett being one of the greatest players I've ever seen. And he had a great game. Wins the Norm Smith in the losing grand final, and with the 9 goals, and it's an amazing game. Yeah, I'd recommend that to anyone that wants to watch a footy game from that era to see what kind of players are running about, because there's some characters, Dermy and Ablett and all those guys running around at the time. There's some of the greatest players. I mean, Ablett's one of the greatest players the league's ever seen, and Dermot's those kind of characters that were playing. Hawthorn had a stacked team as well, and just a fast. That's probably the game that I've watched more than any other that doesn't involve Port. I would say, just because it's a fascinating one to just throw on in the background and go, fuck, these guys did this to each other. It's just, now, there'd be some massive suspensions that would come out of that. If that happened now, would just be unreal.
Just the reports in the first 10 minutes would be insane. For sure. And I remember seeing they actually did Triple M in Melbourne actually did a recall of the 89 grand final. And the funniest part about that recall is the fact that somebody that played in that 89 grand final is in the booth doing the call. Billy Brownless.
Yes, yeah.
He's calling the game, but he's also in the 89 grand final because he's part of Geelong at the time. So it's kind of hilarious how they rib him so bad. They take the Mickey out of him every time they can in that game. So if you want to laugh while watching that game, I think you can find it on YouTube, the triple M recall of it. It's hilarious because it's James Brayshaw, Duck, BT, and Billy Brownless all doing the call, and it's absolutely hilarious because they just literally ribbed the shit out of Billy Brownless that entire time. It is worth the watch if you get it. The footy is great, but the commentary is just absolute gold. So
yeah, no, I'm gonna have to actually give that a go. Billy Brownless has always had that. He's always joked about that game and said that him and Adelaide have 11 goals between them. So
he kicked 2, and he was the decoy.
Yeah, someone's ace. It's like that movie, The Other Guys. There's always the other guys that got to do their job.
Exactly. Well, David, this has been an awesome conversation. It's great. It's great to be able to talk footy. The off season sometimes can get kind of sad because you don't have footy to go with. You don't have the shows. You don't have the banter. You don't have the discussion. So to be able to do this series after has just been such a blessing and so much fun. And to have somebody who's so passionate with the Port Adelaide Power, almost crazy passionate, which I genuinely appreciate that very much.
I happily say to a lot of people, it's an unhealthy obsession being a sports fan, particularly at this level. But it's just it's also what gets you up in the morning. So it's just part of life, isn't it? So
you do not mind. So thank you again so much for joining me and being my Port Adelaide interview. It has been an absolute blast.
Oh, this has been great. I appreciate you reaching out and putting it out there, and this has been great fun. It's yeah, giving me a good chance to chat about footy for the first time in a bit. So yeah, no, this has been great. Thank you.
No problem. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another part of my Australian fan series. There's a few more still left to come. Keep an eye out. They're coming very, very soon. We will see you again very soon.